I think that the simplest way of thinking about it as an audience is when you have a group of people who are consuming your content. You have an audience. A community is when you have a group of people who are consuming content, sharing content with one another, and sending content back to you. So if the party kind of stops when you step away, you probably don't have a community.
Jordan, welcome to Frank Growth. You and I actually met through Hampton when you were CEO. So I've seen your community building instincts up close. Before that, you led the hustle post-acquisition at HubSpot. And earlier on, you were the kind of growth and media leader at the Motley Fool. Today, we're going to pull apart how founders move from content to community and why it compounds growth. So just thanks for being here, man.
Yeah, I'm really excited, man. I appreciate it. And now I know I can't really bullshit anything since you, like you said, you kind of saw things up close at Hampton. So got to be truthful today.
All good things. All good things. Your truth is good. We like it.
Yeah.
So let's dive in. So from the
Cool.
Motley Fool to hustle to Hampton,
Right.
What's kind of the through line for you and how you've approached growth across media, kind of SaaS adjacent and community businesses?
I think the most obvious through line through those three, maybe four companies, if you throw HubSpot in there as well, is this this kind of way of building, awareness through an audience, and then taking that, that audience and that attention and building trust with that audience, and then being able to parlay that trust into a community. It's kind of happened at each and every one of them. And honestly, I didn't even like think about it in that way. And I took a glance at some of your questions ahead of time, and I was like, oh, it actually works out like a really, really nice kind of, linear line. Of course, it wasn't like that in reality, but yeah, I think it's, audience into trust, into community has been present at both, the Motley Fool, the hustle, and then obviously to a large extent, Hampton as well. Yeah. I think the two most important things when it comes to trust are your authenticity, which comes off in your voice, comes off in how uniquely you really are. And I think transparency is a really big other one. So I'll just give you like a quick example. At the Motley Fool, a big part of our authenticity of and who we were at the Motley Fool was this kind of like anti-Wall Street, kind of funky, irreverent, nerdy kind of brand, right? Which was much different from your mainstream kind of investment managers or, Wall Street kind of newsletters and stuff like that. And so we were, for better or worse, just authentically ourselves. But I think that did allow us to build, a lot of trust with our audience. And then also transparency was huge for us. In the financial media space, opaqueness is kind of the norm. You don't have the sort of clarity and transparency with stock pickers or investment newsletters or financial media that you do in other areas. So we would always talk at the Motley Fool about the fact that, if you wanted to know, for instance, if Jim Cramer was a good stock picker, you'd have no way of knowing that. Like no one's like, he's made 832 calls and 48% of them are good. You don't really have that. At the Motley Fool, we did. So it still sounds like I'm there. But it's like, if you were to buy any product from the Motley Fool, you would see as soon as you purchased the product, a scorecard that showed every single stock pick, good and bad and otherwise, that we ever did. So there were these sorts of things, also disclosures with our writers, making sure that you always knew what stocks they held. So there weren't any conflict of interest. Like we were always just really, really big on transparency. So I think your authenticity and your transparency are huge.
So stepping into Hampton, you really were optimizing for depth over breadth.
Yeah.
What was the first systems that you put in place to force the quality of connection and not just increasing membership count, not just increasing number of subscribers at the hustle? How did you grow the number of members at Hampton in that thoughtful way?
Yeah. So there's a bunch of different things I think we did at Hampton. Some of them, were in place beforehand, but, even just by nature of the fact that you had to be doing $1 million in revenue to get in, to even apply to Hampton, I think in and of itself, narrowing your audience is a way of vetting for depth versus breadth. So there was that. In addition to the fact that while I was there, we increased the bare minimum to apply from 1 million to 3 million. So we kind of continued to do that. But then like every single person had to apply, had to interview, either myself or one of the two co-founders watched every single video of every single person that interviewed. And we were, filtering for not just, do you have the bare bones basics? Are you running a company that's doing, X, Y, Z in revenue? But also like the number one criteria for me at the time was, are you someone that's going to give, more than you take? That's really critical for a community. So that was a big part of, depth over breadth. Also, when people joined, of course, we put you into a group with 7 or 8 other people and you have to meet once a month. And so it's about forcing conversations that are beyond transactional, they're beyond superficial. It's like you
Yeah.
have to really be intentional about it, and you gotta start small and kind of take steps there. But it's not easy. It's certainly not easy.
So you've talked about a founder's arbitrage across attention and trust and taste. How do you diagnose which lever a company should lean into first?
Oh, that's a good one. I mean, it feels personal to the founder
Mm.
in terms of what your strengths are. Awareness is all about like, are you great at creating virality? Are you great at creating content? Can you get a ton of eyeballs? I mean, some people naturally have, an aptitude for creating hooks and making a splash, whether it's like creating great content or shit posting or anything in between. You're good at getting an audience. And then there's people, I think, that because of their authority, their credibility, the fact that they're an expert in XYZ area, you naturally have trust. And I think that's an even more important arbitrage. And if you have that, I think it's worth leaning into that. And then I think an even smaller segment of people have great taste, which is really more about curation. And I think if you're somebody that people always say like, oh, you're so great at getting the right people together, or, I love how you think about, this vertical or that vertical, you might be someone who also has great taste. And I think you can build something cool with one of those things. I think if you have two, that's fucking awesome.
What's a Hampton moment where you kind of watch the community directly create its own growth, like in terms of the pipeline of new members or member retention or kind of brand advantage?
Yeah. God, there are so many. I can't remember exactly when it was when SVB kind of imploded. So if you remember at the time, somebody in Hampton actually kind of knew a hot second before kind of Gen Pop kind of knew about SVB, and they shared the information and everybody started scrambling and of course panic, but then it quickly moved towards solutions, introductions. Hey, how do I get my money out? Can you talk to my banker? Here's a private banker. Somebody brought in someone from, I think, Morgan Stanley or JP Morgan to come and do a talk. The community organized itself so fucking well in that moment of like chaos and panic, and to really just help each other out.
Yeah.
And that was one of those moments that I feel like in a small kind of tech community, those sorts of stories carry, and people start hearing about something like that.
Yeah.
But then also, honestly, anytime that somebody wanted to join Hampton, I feel like because a lot of our demographic is on, X or LinkedIn, you probably saw this a million times. People would jump onto Twitter and say like, hey, who's in Hampton? Do you guys actually like this thing? Is it any good? Yeah. And by the time that someone on my team would ping me and say, hey, Jordan, like, there's a tweet, you should go and check it out. I'd go and look and there'd already be 15 answers from members. I'm like, I don't even have to say anything.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff is, oh my God, it's so amazing because that's the part in the middle of the funnel, right? Where you're talking about trust.
There were definitely times where I was one of those people tweeting.
Yeah. Awesome.
So let's talk about the founder as creator. Make the case in 26. Why is the founder as a creator no longer optional?
I think that 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, when there weren't so many platforms available, to build a great company, you needed obviously lots of things, but at the heart of it, you needed a great product. You need to be able to build that product, and then you needed distribution. But there was only a couple options for distribution. If you were like building a physical product, like you need to get into a store. You needed retail partnerships. If you were building an online product, again, there was only so many options. You could syndicate through like, AOL or MSN or Yahoo. Maybe you were lucky enough in the early days to have a website that had like organic search, but there just weren't that many ways to get distribution. So everything was about your product. And today there's 8 million different ways to get distribution. So when I think about, everyone says like, the term creator or founders have to be creators. To me, I always just think about it as distribution. It's like, that is the most important asset now that I think that people can have. You can kind of have an okay product, but if you have 10 million people following you on Twitter or a really, really engaged audience who also trusts you, I mean, look at what people have been able to do with that. It's an incredible competitive advantage now.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking about you left Hampton and then immediately kind of dove into your newsletter. I know you love writing. Like for you, it felt like an easy thing to do. I think there's a lot of founders that maybe they feel like they're being cringe, or they just hate kind of all the content creation work. Is there a minimum viable cadence and frequency that you see people needing to kind of put themselves out there to get the benefits and the kind of this authenticity, credibility factor without becoming basically a full-time creator?
Yeah. I think you have to do something that you like. If you do something that you hate or that makes you feel cringe, eventually I think you're going to end up being bad at it, or you'll just burn out. So I think the first, like most important thing is you got to pick a medium that you don't hate. So I love writing. I've always loved writing. And so for me, that was obvious. I'm like, I could fucking write every day all week and I'd be ecstatic. So a newsletter is simple and easy for me. Some people might not like writing as much. It's like, cool, then choose audio, do a podcast. You don't like that and you don't like writing or exposing yourself, just do pictures, do something on Instagram, and you don't always have to make everything incredibly personable. If that's not what you're comfortable with, then you can create content around your customers, about your customers' pain points. You can do use cases, you can do case studies. There's different ways of doing it besides just being like, I'm going to open myself up and be vulnerable and share everything about my life. If you don't mind doing that, it's awesome because it's a great way to be authentic. But if you don't, there's other ways of doing it too. I just think you need to choose a medium that you actually enjoy.
So let's go back and talk more about the kind of compounding effects of community. When a new startup is getting going, is it audience first, then community, or build community from day one? And are there specific conditions that favor one or the other?
I think it's always better to start with community if you can. I mean, especially I think just today, everyone knows how much more important it is and the kind of optionality that it gives you in your business. It's like, why not start with that there? And you don't have to actually build, quote, a community. You can just do things that facilitate the feeling of the community. So if you're a writer, just even asking for feedback. I'm always kind of cracks me up in my newsletter, in my welcome email. I think my PS or something is like asking people to give me feedback on what I should write about or what they want most. And people write back. People write back all the time. And then when I respond, they're like, I can't believe you wrote back. And I'm like, what the fuck else would I be doing? Like, that's the point of this thing, is building relationships. And so, asking for feedback, building MVPs, throwing things out into beta, asking customers for feedback. Like, those are the sorts of things that are more relational versus just one-to-one. Like, I publish content, you receive, and that's end of transaction.
So if you have to leave founders with one operating principle to create, durable growth through a community, what would it be?
I would just say it starts with you. Everything starts kind of at the top as a founder, and you have to be the type of person that is very comfortable and thrives in this kind of two-way relationship. If you're the kind of person that likes to kind of stay behind their screen, write product specs, build things, ship things, bada bing, bada boom, then it's probably just not right for you and your company, and that's fine. Don't force it. But if you want your entire team to kind of facilitate that sort of ethos, then you have to start, everything just starts with you, and sometimes I think back to one of the first times that Sam reached out to me, probably, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago. It was on Facebook. And he literally hadn't built Trends yet as a part of Hustle. And he cold DM'd me a 3-page Google Doc and said, here's my idea for Trends. Can you give me feedback? It's like, I didn't even know the guy. I'm like, well, sure, I guess I'm gonna fucking give this guy some feedback. So I sent him a Loom or whatever, going through my feedback. But that's how much that kind of community two-way relationship is embedded in him. So it's very natural. I think that, that of course that one of the companies he ends up building is a community product, but it has to really start with you.
All right. Yeah. So Jordan, where can people connect with you online? Maybe talk a little bit about what you're up to now. And if there's anything you'd like to offer folks that are listening.
Yeah. You can find me at jordandipietro.com. There's information on there about my newsletter. It's called Signal Noise. It's a newsletter for founders, business owners, and operators. It goes out once a week on Thursdays. I also do CEO coaching and advisory work. You can find more about that on there as well.
Amazing. Thanks so much for being here, man. This was really great at kind of going deep into, the ideas behind building successful, high growth communities that really create real connection between folks. And it was a map for how to do that and how to take, something that maybe looks like it could be an audience into a real thriving community. So just thanks for being here.
Yeah, man. My pleasure.
Awesome. That's today's episode of Frank Growth. Big thanks to Jordan for the clarity on how to build a community, not just an audience, and how to make your community your retention engine. Here are my top 3 takeaways from our conversation. 1, turn audience into trust and then into community. Prioritize depth over breadth and design it to thrive without you. 2, trust compounds through authenticity and radical transparency. Show results, disclose conflicts. Don't just be performative in your branding. 3, optimize for distribution and conversion over just eyeballs. Founder-led, a medium you enjoy content accelerates 0 to 1 and generates qualified demand. And here's one thing you can do in the next week to turn these ideas into action. Audit your current audience touchpoints and add 1 act of radical transparency. Share real numbers, behind-the-scenes process, or personal context, and invite feedback to spark two-way trust. If this gave you something to think about this week, follow the show and share it with one operator or founder who really needs it. I'm Jason Shafton from Winston Francois. We help tech companies build sustainable, repeatable growth with a proven operating system. The show notes and takeaways are in the description. Be frank, keep growing.